Creepypastas are great, but does anyone have any good, true creepy stories? A few years ago, my brother would get a call on his cell phone around 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. every night. He would answer, and it was this hellish-sounding noise, like static mixed with screams. He changed his cell phone number after a month of this, and it stopped. Then, after a week or so, it began again. The exact same noise. The exact same time. Finally, one day, he decided to dial the number back. It was an old man who had no clue what he was talking about. Still, the calls persisted. If he didn't answer, it would call a few more times. No messages were left. He decided he'd had enough, ended his contract with his phone company, switched to a new one, and then got another new number. You guessed it, the screaming static calls continued after a short delay. By this point, he was terrified every night, unsure why this was happening. He dialed the number back again and got a different person. Around this time, he lost his job and his phone. The calls stopped, of course. His phone was now disconnected. So, one day my mom asked me to listen to this weird message she got on our home phone. It was the static screaming. We showed my brother and he was freaking out. He dialed the number back again, and this time it said the number was disconnected. Never heard from it again after that. This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her late 20s and works as an English tutor in South Korea. One evening, a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy. They were up studying pretty late, and the buses stopped running. Being a long way from his house, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first bus the next morning. She was very reluctant because inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea, but he was begging her and eventually, she relented. They went back to her one-room apartment, and she got into bed while he laid a blanket out on the floor, and they both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., the boy wakes her up. "I'm really hungry," he says, "let's go get some food." She opens her eyes and looks up at him in disbelief. "It's 2 a.m., go back to bed." But the student insists, "No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now." She tells him that there's some ramen in the kitchen and he can fix himself some. This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want ramen and insists they go to a 24-hour place just down the road. Eventually, after several minutes of persuasion, the boy gets her to come with him to the restaurant. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they're on the street, the boy turns to her and says, "I'm not hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." They call the police and discover that a homeless man had been living in her apartment, sleeping under her bed, for over 2 months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on her floor, so he had a clear view under the bed. The police arrested the man, and thankfully there were no other issues, but that's by far the creepiest thing that's ever happened to anyone I know. When I was in 8th grade, I went on a school trip that was called the Louisiana tour. It was mostly going around to significant sites in South Louisiana. One of the places we went was Myrtle's Plantation, which is considered to be one of the most haunted places in the country. There are all kinds of stories about the place, but at one point we were standing in a room as part of a larger group and the tour guide was talking about something, I don't remember what. As I was standing there, I started to hear what sounded like someone hitting a piano key. After I heard it a couple of times, I started to look around for the source of the noise. I didn't see a piano, but I kept hearing it. So I asked my friends who were standing near me if they heard it. They said no. When I heard it again, I said there it was again and that they must have heard it. They thought I was crazy. So I went back to looking around the room. Everyone's eyes were on the tour guide except for one woman. She caught my eye and pointed at me and then at her ear with a questioning look. I realized she was asking if I heard it too, and I nodded. At this point, the tour guide started telling a story about a soldier who had died there and that he played the piano, and multiple guests had reported hearing him playing in the night. I honestly didn't know what to think. I guess I still don't. I talked to the woman as we were all leaving the room, and she had heard the exact same thing as me, but her husband and son had not heard it. When I was growing up, one of my best friends told me about a very creepy situation involving him, his younger brother, and a man in the window. When my friend and his little brother were younger, they shared a bedroom. They're some years apart, but his younger brother was born with a multitude of different health issues, including multiple sclerosis, and he's confined to a wheelchair and cannot care for himself. So, to keep an eye on him overnight when his parents couldn't, they shared a bedroom. One night, My friend randomly woke up for no particular reason and happened to glance over at his younger brother, but he noticed something very startling. A strange silhouette of a man wearing a top hat looking in through the window behind his younger brother's crib. The first thing my friend did was jump up and turn the light on, then he ran into his parents' room to tell them what he saw. When his parents came back into their room to investigate, his younger brother was having a seizure in his crib. A few of his family members say it was his younger brother's guardian angel standing in the window that night. My friend believes it was death. It's all still pretty unsettling to me. It's hard to say what qualifies as creepy. It could maybe be seen as heartwarming. I don't know. My mother swears this is a true story, and frankly, I don't see why she would lie about it. My mom had 3 kids. There's me, the youngest, and my older brother, but before either of us was born, there was Jonathan. He was a sweet little blonde boy with big blue eyes, known for accidentally repeating Dad's swears in church. He was a wholesome kid, great in school, and active outside. When he was almost 6, he was riding his bike, fell, and hit his head on a rock. He got up and said he felt fine. My mom found him the next morning in his bed when she tried to wake him up for kindergarten, one pupil dilated and the other not. She got him airlifted to the nearest hospital. During this time, Jonathan's best friend, Nick, was sitting at the breakfast table eating cereal. He suddenly got up from the table and went to the door. When his mom asked him what was up, he said that Johnny was calling for him. You see, he and Johnny lived on separate blocks, but they weren't allowed to cross the street without a parent yet because they were still fairly young. But they lived close enough to call to one another to come out and talk at their respective street corners. So Nick went out to the street corner while his mother received a call from my mom. She told her that Johnny had just been declared dead in the hospital from a latent brain aneurysm that was triggered by the fall. Nick's mom could hardly handle this news and was now wondering where her son had gone. But he came back a few minutes later. He said that he heard Johnny calling to him, but he wasn't at the street corner when he looked. He then sat down to continue eating his cereal. When his mom asked what Johnny had been saying, he replied that Johnny had come to say, goodbye. My mom told me this story when I was young, and it stuck with me. I wish I could have met him, but truthfully, I wouldn't be here to type this story for all of you if he hadn't died, as my mother only wanted 2 kids. I'm thankful for the chance I was given to live and sometimes feel like he died for me. I'm not religious, but I do feel spiritual when I think of Johnny. A weird one that happened to my sister a couple of years ago. Background info. She and her, now, husband were house-sitting for my brother-in-law's uncle. The uncle is old and starting to lose it. He rents out a basement suite, and a nice lady lives downstairs. She cleans the house when she is there, but he wanted my brother-in-law to come check on things and feed his old cat once in a while. Okay, so the first day they go to house sit, they get in but can't find the cat to make sure it's okay. My sister has cats and knows they like to hide when they are dying, so they were all worried and looking everywhere for this cat, in all the rooms, under the beds, and everything. They even checked with the lady downstairs. She hadn't seen it. So my sister opens up the closet in the spare bedroom and starts looking through the stuff on the floor. She moves a couple of things and sees a set of feet on the ground in the closet, with clothes blocking anything above them. The feet have nicely painted toenails and look human, but she assumes it is a doll or something. They look in a few more places, and all of a sudden, the cat is in the middle of the living room just hanging out. So they lock the deadbolt and leave. My sister and her boyfriend went out for dinner and a movie, and she couldn't stop thinking about the feet and how real they looked. My sister had started dating her boyfriend fairly recently and didn't want to seem crazy, so she didn't bring it up. But a few hours into the night, she decided she needed to tell him. He decides that it's probably a doll but offers to go back and check anyway. When they arrive, my sister will only stay on the patio because she is scared, which makes him realize that this must be something serious. They go to get in the door, but the deadbolt is now unlocked, and the handle is locked. Now he thinks there must be someone in there. There is a fireplace near the door, so once he's inside, he grabs the sharp poker from the fireplace tools and starts to sneak toward the closet. He opens the closet and sees the same set of feet with painted toenails on the floor. He pokes them lightly with the poker, and the toes scrunch up. He proceeds to smack the foot as hard as he can with the poker and yells, "Get out of there." Out comes a lady in her mid-30s, holding the cat and a can of Coke. Turns out she was friends with the basement tenant. When she became homeless, the friend let her stay with her until she found out she was addicted to crack. She started leaving drugs around the house and had shady people coming over, so the tenant kicked her out. Somehow, She got a key for upstairs and had been staying there while the uncle was gone. The police were called, and she was arrested. When I was younger, my family was extremely poor and lived in a very old mobile home on some land my grandpa owned. This piece of land was in a very small town out in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and was covered in woods. The town itself was your typical small country town where football was king and there was nothing to do but get drunk or high on the weekend. It was also the type of town, along with it being the early 90s, where one didn't typically have to worry too much about locking their doors or setting an alarm. Now, our trailer was a 2-bedroom, and my parents, always putting us kids ahead of themselves, slept in the living room on a fold-out couch. My room was directly connected to it, and my sister's room was down a hallway past the kitchen and bathroom at the other end of the trailer. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, my dad was woken up by a feeling that there was someone in the room. He looked around a bit and saw a large male figure sitting in the easy chair just feet from the bed. My dad quickly flipped on the light switch next to his bed and saw it was a neighbor from down the road named Carter. Carter was known to be a frequent drug user and was often in trouble with the law because of this. My dad asked him what the hell he was doing there and told him to get out. He responded, "I can't get out. The demons are chasing me and your house is the only safe one." My dad, who I should mention is a fairly large and terrifying person, responded that if he didn't get out, and get out quickly, the house would be a lot less safe for him. "If I leave, they'll get me. They've been chasing me all night. If they catch me, I'm dead." My dad's response was that there were no demons, but that if he didn't get the hell out of his house, he'd be dead. From what I've been told, since I was asleep for this part, my mom also hurled a few threats and, while she may not be big, she was equally as terrifying. I believe it was her anger that finally scared him off. My dad got up and locked the door and watched through the blinds as Carter decided that since he couldn't outrun the demons, he'd steal our old beater Suburban that my dad always left the keys in. He drove around for about an hour. We called the police, and it took them about that long to get out to us since the closest police station was about 20 or 30 minutes away. He finally brought it back and was arrested and taken to jail. He was deemed crazy and ended up locked in a mental institution. The scarier part is that for years after this, we'd get phone calls where all we'd hear was music that would have lyrics like, "I'm going to kill you." These calls lasted for years and followed us from house to house even though we always had different numbers and would even be in different states. We always thought it was him sending us a message. The calls stopped when I was about 12. I haven't had anything too creepy happen to me, so this probably isn't as good as most of the stuff on here. Anyways, it was a while ago when I was maybe 13 or 14. I lived in one of those little mobile home parks that aren't run down, but they aren't top quality at the same time. Anyways, it was kind of a sketchy neighborhood, and some weird things happened there. One time, there was constant screaming coming from a house diagonal from us, and my dad made me and my 2 siblings go to bed, so I don't know exactly what happened with that. In 2 other cases there were shootings in houses, and one lady who lived across from us, who my parents and I suspected to be on meth, nearly lost her life at the hands of her boyfriend. So, knowing all this, we generally kept our doors locked, even putting a metal bar to block the sliding glass door from opening. Before the most intense incident happened, I had been the victim of several cases of window knocking. It usually happened in the late hours of the night, when I was up playing video games. The first time, a light was shown through my window, most likely a flashlight, before the knocking. I wasn't that worried, as my window was almost 6 feet off the ground. On the third time, I even went so far as to knock back. These 3 cases happened over the course of a month and stopped after I knocked back. Flash forward a couple of months, and my 2 sisters, 7 and 2, my mom, and I are home alone, because my dad worked night shifts at Walmart back then. It was in the middle of the summer, so it had been a very hot day, so naturally, we had the back door open to the screen door to let a breeze in. We had forgotten to close it and were sitting on the couch finishing a movie. Now keep in mind, all that separates the living room from the back door is a small half wall that's more of a roof support than a wall. So we had just finished the movie when we hear a sharp tap on the back door, as if someone had thrown a rock at it. We would have chalked this up to being kids fooling around, as I did with the window incidents, but our neighborhood had a 10 p.m. curfew, and it was past 11 p.m. We all go silent, and my mom turns off the movie to see if the sound comes again, and it does. At this time, we realize that the back door is open and the screen doesn't lock, so anyone could waltz right in. We're all a little bit freaked out at this point, and we know we have to close the door. I was probably the toughest/bravest person in the house. We were all girls, so my mom tells me to go run and close the door. I get up and they're all following behind me as I go to retrieve our spare door-blocking bar from the side of the washer. We all go and stand in the kitchen and watch the back door, trying to see if we could see anyone, but we couldn't see past the reflections of the house lights. I start to muster up the courage to go to the door, right as there's creaking as if someone is going up the stairs that lead to a small deck that's attached to the back door. My mom and sisters all run into my sister's shared room that's located at the very back of the house, leaving me standing there just maybe 7 feet away from the door. I decide that it's now or never, and run up to the door, close and lock it, and I go to close the curtains. I reach for the first side of the curtains, and I barely make out the silhouette of a person maybe 2 feet away from the door. I nearly messed myself and ran to join the rest of the family. We then spend 30 minutes or so looking out my sister's window. It faces the same direction as the back door, but you can't see onto the deck that well, and trying to see if we can spot anything. We don't, and are about to go out of the room, when we hear huge thumps on the glass of the door, as if someone is throwing themselves against it. This goes on for maybe 15 minutes, starting and stopping, and my mom is contemplating running to her room on the other side of the house to grab her phone and call the police. The thumping stops for a few minutes, so she decides to just stay with us. Needless to say, we didn't sleep at all that night. In the morning we go to check it out and see marks made as if out of anger with a knife in the wood of the deck. We reported the incident to the homeowners association and the police, but we never found out who it was. My first cat died on December 31st, 2012. I'd had her for about 17 years, so I was very upset when she passed. She was my best friend. After she passed, I had several dreams in which she was alive and I was petting her and cuddling her. I would wake up crying because I realized she was dead once the dream was over. It was tearing me apart. In October 2013, I finally decided to adopt another cat. This particular one reminded me very much of my old cat, with the same markings but a different color, and she was around the same age as my old cat when I first brought her home. The new kitty was traumatized from being at the shelter, so it took her a few weeks to adjust to us. In that time, I started noticing that even though she wasn't interacting with us very much, she was always playing by herself. And I swear I saw her chasing a shadow cat many times. This thing was not her own shadow, as it moved freely on its own. I would see it out of the corner of my eye, and obviously the new cat saw it too. One day, a few months after we'd had the new cat, I was in the kitchen and a cat walked in. I saw it out of the corner of my eye and assumed it was the new kitty. It was dark colored, and the new kitty is dark. It rubbed up against my leg. As I stooped to pet it, nothing was there. I went into the other room, and the new kitty was asleep in the armchair. Just judging by how comfortable she looked and how deeply asleep she was, she had been there for a while. Whatever rubbed against my leg had cat hair because I felt it. I've never felt afraid of it, but stuff like that has happened many times since we got the new cat. I have other stories too if anyone is interested. My house seems to be a spot for weird happenings. I was 4-ish years old when my parents took us up to Wisconsin to visit my grandma's family. We stayed at this hotel, I don't know the name of it, but it had an awesome pool. I always loved to swim, so I spent most of the trip in the pool, playing with this other girl I met there. I don't remember what she looked like, but I remember having a friend at the pool who I would play and talk with, which was nice because my little brother was too small to swim and there weren't any other kids in the family we were visiting. I had kind of forgotten about the hotel and the pool until years later. My grandma pulled me aside at her house and asked if I remembered the trip. I said yes, kind of. I was pretty young but I remembered the drive up and the pool. She said that I spent the whole time in the pool talking to an imaginary friend, laughing and playing like someone was really there with me. That's not too weird, lots of little kids have imaginary friends, right? That's what she thought, too. As they checked out of the hotel, my grandma mentioned how much her granddaughter loved the pool and that I'd made an imaginary friend there, another little girl my age. It was the typical grandparent stuff, booing and awing over how cute it was. That's when the hotel worker went pale and whispered to my grandma that a little girl around my age had drowned in the pool the previous year. She never mentioned it to my parents, I guess, but that day she pulled me aside and told me the story. I was shocked because I do remember making a friend at the hotel pool. Okay, so I'm a massage therapist. I work for myself and frequently go to clients' homes at night. Whenever I used to have a new client, I would bring my boyfriend with me as kind of a backup. Anyway, the client's condo was in a really nice area in Chandler, Arizona. It was around 8 p.m. when I arrived. I got out of my truck, grabbed my bag, and started looking for the apartment because this was one of those mega complexes and, of course, the numbers were barely visible. As I was walking around, I noticed that every light I walked by would start flickering really quickly. The light would be fine 1 minute, and as soon as I walked by, it would start flashing. I felt like someone was watching me, but I shrugged it off and found the condo as quickly as possible. My session lasted 90 minutes. I packed up and headed back to my truck, except it wasn't in the spot my boyfriend had parked it in. So I called him. He said he was coming and that something had happened, so he had to move. I got in the truck and he was super pale, and his hands were shaking. I asked him what happened. He told me that as I was walking toward the apartments from the parking lot, he saw a girl behind me, walking in tandem with me, almost like a shadow. He said that after he bent down to light a cigarette, neither one of us was in his line of vision anymore. Not too creepy, right? About halfway through his cigarette, he saw someone walk behind the truck really quickly in the rearview mirror. He said it was the same girl. He was starting to feel a little freaked out, but nothing too bad. He said he turned on his headphones and leaned the chair back, I guess to take a nap, when he felt a thumping under his feet on the floorboard. He said he looked out into the parking lot and saw the girl crawl out from under the hood of the truck and stand up. She walked backward and stared at him the whole time, and kind of disappeared into the shadows of the awnings on the opposite side of the parking lot. So he peeled out and sat at the nearest gas station, which was right next door, for the rest of my appointment. Normally, I would have called bull on that, but this guy didn't believe in the paranormal at all, and he was clearly freaked out. I never went back to that particular client's home after that. When I was 13, my dad, my older sister, and I moved from Cleveland, Ohio, to Wilmington, North Carolina, and rented an old one-story house. It had 2 living rooms separated by a wood-paneled wall. We didn't use the side that you had to enter through the kitchen. We just stored boxes on that side of the house. We were all kind of depressed because we lived in Cleveland for 10 years and we missed our friends. We had only lived there for 6 months when things got intense. It was the only place my dad ever broke the lease. It started out innocently enough. My dad worked long hours, so my sister and I were always home alone, and we watched a lot of Johnny Bravo and the Powerpuff Girls. We noticed a long scratching sound one night, and she muted the television. It was coming from the wall behind the television. The room on the other side was the unused living room. We both went to check, but there was nothing there. We told our dad the next day, and he put out mouse traps, but they never caught anything even though the scratching sound continued. I started sleeping in her bed most nights after that. One night, we heard banging in the kitchen but we were too scared to look. In the morning, we went out and my dad was making breakfast. He asked us why we opened all the cabinet doors and said that if we did have mice, they would get into the food. We said we didn't, but we didn't tell him about the noises. One morning at breakfast, my dad asked me if I remembered anything from the previous night. I said no, and he told me what happened. He woke up, and I was standing at the foot of his bed staring at him. He was spooked and said my name. I didn't respond, and he told me to go to bed, but I just stood there. Then I walked to his window and stared out of it. He asked me what I was doing, and I said, "Her crying is keeping me up." He said no one was crying and told me to go to bed. I said, "Okay," and walked out. My dad is very no-nonsense and doesn't believe in ghosts at all, but he looked really unsettled. My sister looked horrified. She wouldn't let me sleep in her bed anymore. About a month before we moved away, my sister and I were watching television. She turned it off and said she had to tell me something. She told me that while I was at school, she had been on the computer. The computer desk was against the wall that had 2 glass sliding doors and 4 floor-to-ceiling windows. The doors led to a closed-in sunroom. She said that all of a sudden, the glass sliding doors and windows started violently shaking. No windows were open, and nothing else in the house shook. And we didn't live near any railroad tracks. One day, it happened to me. My sister was in Cleveland visiting friends, and my dad was at work. I was on the computer reading fanfiction when all of a sudden, the glass doors and windows violently shook. I instantly started crying and ran out of the house. I sat on the driveway until my dad came home. I told him, but he didn't dismiss it. He just looked away. I asked if it had ever happened to him, and he said yes. We moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, 2 weeks later.